female gentlemen, lots of people ask me to do lore for Dungeons of Dragons creatures. I love lore, and I love creatures. So here we are. All right, we're starting with copper dragons. All right, this was decided by me and by no one else because that's just the one that popped up. So we're doing this one. Let me know if you want more D&D stuff because apparently there's a lot of really crazy like gods and elves and creatures and stuff. And also let me know if you want more dragons, if you want me to cover all the different types of dragons. See, I personally am familiar with some D&D lore because I've actually read some of the Forgotten Realms books a while back. It was recommended to me by Girl DM, a Vtuber, and I actually read like 6 or 7 books of the Forgotten Realms, as well as just various me understanding random stuff. So log in, boys and girls. Let's see what we got.
Continuing on our quest to detail and explain the subtle and not so subtle differences between all of the metallic dragons has been a very fun experience because from the outside they all look the same, but once you take a closer look, they all have very unique and flavored features that makes each of them pop in their own special way.
Right.
Today we shall talk about the life of the party, the prankster dragon, or as you would know it, the copper dragon.
Wait, what? So all the dragons don't just have like various powers and stuff? They all have different personalities, and that's amazing. That's awesome. All right.
The copper dragons are known to be storytellers, pranksters, jokers, and riddlers. They are extremely social dragons who...
Riddler dragons! Bro, see, I knew I was starting with the right one. I knew! I love Riddler dragons. I didn't know it was a thing, but now I need one.
Thrive to amuse, to misguide, to subvert, to frustrate, but most of all, to entertain and be entertained. They live in hills and rocky terrains. Now,
bro, dude, look, man, I watched some Dungeons and Dragons movies and shorts, and like, I don't know, I feel like I have so much experience with Dungeons and Dragons lore from like different places, but I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what you're looking at. That's the craziest part. I watched the Honor Among Thieves movie. I watched a bunch of the the Critical Role thing. But hey.
When it comes to physical appearance of the copper dragon, you really gotta pay attention this time because copper dragon territories tend to overlap big time with many other dragons, but specifically with red dragons.
Yeah, you don't want to think it's a copper dragon and tap it on the shoulder and then it's a red dragon and eats you. All I know is the red dragons are the really dangerous ones. That's the only thing I know about dragons. The red dragons, they're like and the black dragons are like the really dangerous guys.
Now, red dragons and copper dragons can look shockingly similar to a stray observer, and the difference between them in terms of social interactions could not be more different. To keep it simple, a red dragon will eat you and your children, while a copper dragon will invite you over for dinner and make you laugh.
That's crazy.
So telling them apart is...
I didn't even know there were docile, friendly, prankster, goofball dragons. I had no idea.
Kind of crucial. Both dragons can be found in the same environments, their colors are very similar, and their horns could be potentially mistaken by an adventurer, so pay close heed here. The real tell here are the wings. The manta ray-shaped wings of the copper dragon will undoubtedly help you differentiate it from red dragons.
Now I'm not gonna have that problem if I'm ever bumping into a dragon.
And that really will be the only clue that you will ever get. Brass dragons can also be found in close proximities to copper dragons, and those can be even harder to differentiate since they have the same style of wings. The big difference here, though, is that copper dragons have very long and curved alar limbs, which create this sort of U-shaped wing situation. So
this is the craziest amount of lore I've ever seen in my life. The fact that there are these differences, like dude, this is like National Geographic.
If you were to see them flying, you would be able to tell them apart if you pay close attention.
13% of the dragons commit 50% of the burn victims.
In that way. Otherwise, their facial structure can be differentiated by the fact that brass dragons have no horns, whereas copper dragons
that's a
do.
pretty good way.
Now, social and combat interactions between the copper dragons and other types of dragons in their environments are actually fairly interesting, which is, of course, not something that the 5th edition Monster Manual covers. But hey, that's what we're here for. In order to break down all of their secrets, let's first see what the actual Monster Manual tells us, and then take it from there.
All right.
The manual tells us about their social personality and their pranking nature, of course.
Dude, I had no idea. I thought dragons in D&D were just this ancient civilization of creatures that used to be in charge until the elves literally fucked them with magic, space magic, and ruined everything, and then they all went crazy. And then they're just like sitting there in like caves guarding treasure and stuff because they all went insane. That was kind of my impression of dragons. I had no idea that there were like actual intelligent dragons you could communicate with anymore.
Basically everything that we have already covered. They tell us that they're willing to carve out sections of their lair in order to host bards and possibly other storytellers just for the purpose of conversation. And they tell us that they like metals for treasure and that they're wary of showing off their hoard to people. You know, very simple, basic information.
I mean, that makes sense. Most dragons are like, come to my hoard and I will kill you. These guys are like, we don't actually want you to come to our hoard.
This very specific type of dragon. So now let's talk about what they actually don't tell you. Let's start where we left off. Social interactions between dragons. See, the monster manual does not tell you that even though copper dragons love to socialize and entertain all manner of intelligent creatures, they actually avoid as much as they can interacting with other dragons. That is,
so they're funny, goofball jokers, and they're also antisocial? They're literally me. They are literally me, guys.
Because copper dragons really do enjoy being the life of the party. They love the spotlight and showing off how witty they are. But
and I just said, after we do every lore dive we do for a D&D creature, we're putting it on a tier list for how much I like the creature and the lore. I already decided.
But they get incredibly annoyed when they get bested or when someone else takes on that spotlight. Seldom any creature can actually do that other than, well, other copper dragons. When a copper dragon meets another, they banter with each other, sometimes for hours, but some other times for days. They do their best to one-up.
They will literally sit there yapping and yelling at each other for days? For days! That's amazing.
Each other during the banter, becoming more and more outrageous and personal every single time they try to outdo each other. Now this goes on and on and on until eventually one of the dragons ends up offended by one of the jokes, vows for revenge, and then storms off. Now this never turns violent and the actual anger doesn't really last for long, but the rivalry this creates does last long, in fact, for centuries. The two dragons typically become rivals for hundreds of years, playing practical jokes on one another and pranking each other without end, which is, of course, quite inconvenient for the two of them over time. Now, copper dragons know that dealing with each other typically results in this ending, and as such, they try to avoid each other as much as they can unless...
Dude, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's incredible. This is like absolute cinema, dude. This is like absolute cinema. They avoid each other because they just piss each other off. That's amazing.
They want a rival for life. Now, something similar actually happens when a copper dragon meets the very sociable brass dragon, where the conversation lasts for hours.
So there are many social dragons? This is just a thing in D&D that I just had no idea was even a thing? Alright.
Hours until it really ends with either the copper dragon getting bored because the brass dragon is not saying anything witty back, or because the brass dragon gets offended at some outrageous personal joke coming from the copper dragon. These interactions typically end there, and one of the two typically just storms off abruptly after hours of conversation. Now, copper dragon mating rituals are actually quite adorable because...
This is a level of lore that I have never expected to reach. We are talking about the mating rituals of copper dragons. Yes, we made it here. We made it here.
As cheesy as it sounds, they look for a mate that can make them laugh. They use their wit to cleverly compliment their date. They use their skill for pranks to create surprises for each other. And instead of getting offended by outrageous personal jokes, they become enthralled with each other's ability to, well, like I said before, make each other laugh. These relationships, for as intense as they are, they actually don't last very long. After the mating is done and the children are raised, the dragons will almost always separate. Copper dragons, being free spirits, forces them to want to seek new adventures and new people to joke around with. Now, for obvious reasons, copper dragons also avoid red and blue dragons, who also tend to overlap with their territories as well. But if forced into a confrontation with them, the copper dragon will try their best to embarrass them and frustrate. How? Well, let's start.
They're literally goofballs. They're just copper dragons of Riz. They're not like strong and beefy, so they're just out there making people laugh. Nux's lack of D&D lore is rather shocking. You shut up, man. All right, I'm here, coming in blind. I'm absorbing all lore. It's the job.
Talk about some of the cool combat abilities that copper dragons have.
All right. What do they do?
The monster manual completely neglects to talk about one of the coolest features of the copper dragon, which is their amazing ability to control the earth.
That's pretty
all
cool.
dragons are natural sorcerers. Typically, they all have the ability to cast a limited amount of spells that sort of relate to their color and environment. I mean, they are extraordinarily magical creatures, we know that. Copper dragons specifically can mold the earth at their will.
Right, so copper dragons are earthbenders. I guess red dragons are firebenders.
Enormous pillars of stone turn the ground into mud and move rock from one place to another. See, the monster manual very specifically mentions that they like to carve out places within their lair for bards, but they sort of miss talking about how they can.
They kidnap singers and they just put them in their lair? Entertain me, bard? That's amazing.
Do that. In fact, they love building and moving the rock around inside of their lair, specifically to create very complex labyrinths and then fill them with traps. The earth is
Most dragons are like, I'm big, I'm scaly, and I'll eat you, so you don't steal my stuff. Copper dragons be like, well, actually,
everything to these dragons, to the point where they actually enjoy making their lairs super compact and snug, even to the point where it actually prevents them from flying inside of their lair. Why? Because the dragon doesn't actually need to fly, in fact doesn't really like to fly as much.
Bro, they built this shit in their... There's no way they actually built this in their own lair, just to be annoying.
Instead, jumps from one place to another and climbs a lot. The copper dragon is virtually the only dragon who would specifically make its lair as snug as possible. In fact, it is described that the copper dragon have overdeveloped massive shoulders and thighs, because basically all they do is jump and climb. Here, let me quote you the combat style of the copper dragon as described to us by the 2nd edition Monstrous Manual. Quote, copper dragons like to taunt and annoy their opponents, hoping they will give up or become angry and act foolishly. In the encounter, a copper dragon will jump from one side of an opponent to another, landing on inaccessible or vertical stone surfaces. If there are no such places around a dragon's lair, the dragon will create them ahead of time using its stone shape, move earth, and wall of stone. An angry copper dragon will mire its opponents using rock to mud, and will force its victims who escape the mud into it with kicks. When fighting airborne opponents,
bro, they'll make quicksand, they'll fly above it, and then they'll run behind you and nudge you to fall into the quicksand. And then you will drown, and it'll just float there above while you're slowly dying, and it'll be like, tee, 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 got him, got him.
A dragon will draw its enemies into narrow stone gorges, where it can use its spider climb ability in an attempt to maneuver the enemy into colliding with the walls. End quote. This is what fighting a copper dragon is like.
It sounds like the worst thing in the world. I would hate to fight one of these guys. This is the worst type of opponent of all time.
Lead you around from place to place, force you into a place where you cannot run around, and then slam you with rock spells. And they do all of this without even flying. How epic is that? It's interesting because this is what they would have to do if they would want to have any chance whatsoever of ever defeating a red dragon, since, well, red dragons are virtually the strongest dragon in the world, at least in terms of pure might, and they tend to live on the same ecosystems, so they have to be creative in that regard and prevent said dragon from flying if they are to fight each other. A red dragon attacking a copper dragon.
Imagine going in there ready to fight a red dragon with brute force, and then you end up in like some random copper dragon maze quicksand bullshit trap. You just get absolutely destroyed by a retard dragon with a sense of humor. That's amazing.
Slayer would be at a severe disadvantage because of that. You can probably already see that
you go in there expecting to fight Superman, but you end up fighting Batman with prep time. And it's so much worse.
Copper dragons are actually quite smart, or at least they use their wit in many fronts. They're quite good hunters because of this, especially when it comes to food. See, copper dragons can eat virtually anything.
Home Alone ass dragon.
But hunting their meals is as much a part of the meal as the actual eating.
No!
They hate it when the meal that they're hunting does not fight back. Because of that, they're particularly fond of hunting dangerous, poisonous monsters, specifically the giant, monstrous...
These guys are living on the edge every single day!
...which is their favorite food. The monster manual doesn't actually tell you, but copper dragons are in fact immune to poison and venom when it is ingested.
Oh my god,
to the dragon,
they are literally trolling so hard. They go after poisonous things and venomous things just because they know that they're going to try and they're not going to succeed at poisoning them.
Venom is tasty and spicy, which enriches their meals.
Oh
and their digestive tract is
Scorpions come with a side of sriracha sauce because they have venom.
Designed in such a manner that it'll actually protect them against this sort of poison damage. They are, however, still vulnerable to poison injections, like the sting attack of a scorpion or the fangs of a giant viper. Most, if not all, copper dragons though gain the sorcerer's ability to cure poison though, so it's not as much of a problem for them, but regardless, fighting these monsters provides a fun challenge for the dragon while hunting.
Nice.
Now, what's interesting though is that copper dragons who live close or in humanoid society do end up acclimating.
There are copper dragons that live in humanoid society? What?
And adapting to humanoid food. In fact, it is well known by those who know of copper dragons living in a city that they tend to fall addicted specifically to wine.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
Dragons love wine, though
God.
their immunity to ingested poison would prevent them from actually getting drunk. Do keep in mind though that rarely do copper dragons get the ability.
Dragons run taverns in some campaigns? Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, I'm literally in love with this world. I am in love with this world.
To polymorph into humans. In the monster manual, only ancient copper dragons have the ability, but even still, not 100% of ancient copper dragons would even get it. Copper dragons crave society and interaction with humanoids, so they find themselves all the time being forced to make deals with towns or cities as protectors in exchange for being allowed to have property around the city. If the dragon had the ability to polymorph into a human, then of course he wouldn't have to do that, like I said before, he would just live with the humans, but that ability seems to be fairly rare amongst this particular kind of dragon. What happens sometimes though, and this is especially true for copper dragons who live close to humanoid societies, is that these dragons can turn evil. See, the monster manual mentions that copper dragons are very careful with their hordes, especially around guests. What they don't actually tell you is that copper dragons are actually the greediest out of all of the metallic dragons.
I hate it, man. I absolutely hate it. These are the Jew dragons, okay? Alright, I'll be not trying to get racist or anything, okay? But these are the Jew dragons. They're crafty, they're little sons of bitches. They're out there, they're making traps, they don't fight head on, they just fucking manipulate shit, alright? Alright, they're out there, they're running taverns or whatever the hell. They have their kosher wine, all right? I don't know, man. I don't know what's that. They're hoarding their gold. They're funny. They nag incessantly. They're always debating each other. Dude, this is the first monster lore of D&D that I did. I did one on like the world building a few months ago. This is the first one I dive into when they hit me with the Jew dragons. I picked the one dragon out of 100,000 separate creatures in the D&D universe, and I ended up with this one. Like, what?
Their avarice peaks to the point of challenging even those of the chromatic variety. Quote, so taken are they with their own charm that they cannot help but believe that they deserve to have whatever they want, end quote.
Right.
See, these dragons are the rogue or the scoundrel.
And these dragons control the media. I will kill myself.
Heroes of the dragon kind. You can find some really nice, charming ones, witty and fun to be around, and then you can have some of them who will steal and misdirect others just that they can have the treasure.
Based.
In fact, Gary Gygax himself described these dragons as extremely selfish. What they do is they use their wit and charm to guile fools into giving them treasure, or they use their wit to form legit or illicit businesses with the purpose of obtaining large wealth.
Right.
In fact,
illicit businesses to obtain large wealth. Got it. Fuck, man.
Many a thieves guild are actually run by copper dragons around cities. They don't kill people, of course, but they have no qualms about stealing or taking money from them as long as...
they don't kill, but they scam. Love that. Hell yeah, dude. Based. Love that. Yup. They don't kill, they just scam. Yep. I see it. Yep, absolutely.
They felt like they have outsmarted their competition.
Honestly, they have a code. Dude, what are we doing?
At least there is some honor among these thieves. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters, Rukato Fan, Major...
That was a great video. I love this so much. I love lore, and I feel like I'm excited to dive into another whole world of lore. Definitely subscribe for more of it. Mr. Rex is great. He let me react to his videos, and I'm very excited to keep doing so. I'll link it in the description. And I plan on keep doing more. Let me know in the comments future lore dives into specific creatures in D&D you want. I don't know. There's more dragons. There's gods. There's creatures. There's spells. There's elves. And I'm excited to see what we got. So see you in the next one, everybody. And stay weird, fans. Like, subscribe, and this video was streamed live on kick.com/Nuxanor. See you there. Stay weird, fan.